Hi, my name's John Reed and welcome back to Cherry Red TV. Our special guest today is Ray Fenwick, who's the star of a new anthology available on Lemon Records, one of our Cherry Red imprints. And yeah, we're just going to chat with Ray about his long and illustrious career. So Ray, thank you for coming in.
Enjoyed it.
So we're going to start right at the beginning,
yeah.
back in the midst of time. And I guess this would be going back to the 1950s or whatever.
Yeah, this would be.
And
yeah,
I
I was 10, so it was 1956.
Yes, so although you've done many things, your career's obviously revolved around you being a guitarist.
Yeah.
So tell us about your very first guitar.
My very first guitar was from a music shop in Romford in Essex, where we used to live, and my mum bought it for me. It was called Wells Music. It sold records and a few guitars. One of those places that had the booths that you went in and listened to your favourite album before you bought it. And it was a lovely guitar. It was I can't remember the price, but it was a good guitar. I still have it. It's a nylon strung classical guitar, and that's what I started with.
So, and what were your earliest influences? Obviously, you were very young.
Of course, things my parents were listening to, like Johnny Otis' show. They liked Frank Sinatra. They loved Winifred Atwell, who I became a great fan of, the piano player. Early influences, Lonnie Donegan, of course, and of Hank Marvin, the great Hank Marvin, Shadows, Dwayne Eddy. I also liked Chet Atkins because my mother used to buy Chet Atkins albums. She loved them, and I thought they were two people, Chet and Atkins, because they sounded like two people playing. But of course it was one, and a style that I learnt later in my career.
Yeah. So, okay, I guess you're a teenager. Presumably at some point you join a local band or something?
Yes, they were called Dante's Inferno. I remember the name of one of them. It was Derek Bates, I think. His father was a builder, and we used to go around his house to... Terry Bates, sorry Terry. We used to go around his house to rehearse. And we put a little band together. I remember we had a much older bass player, where we got him from, probably a neighbour or something. But the band was quite good, and we started to do local gigs. We did one at the Romford Lawn Tennis Club, sort of Sunday afternoon, and this is I'm sort of 14 now, and I'm getting paid. This is good. And the band that was on with us, they were topping the bill. I thought that they were much older than us, but they probably weren't. They probably were, I don't know, 18, 19, but they seemed much older. And right at the end of the evening, the guitar player came over to me and he said, "You should do this for a living." And of course, I went back to my dad. You can imagine this guy. And say, "Dad, I just saw this bloke up at the lawn tennis club and he said I should do this for a living." And of course, that was the start of it, but I did in the end.
Yeah. So was the next group Rupert and the Red Devils, was it? Or
yes,
was
it was Rupert and the Red Devils. My mum found that advert. It was either in the Romford Recorder or it was in Melody Maker. We used to have Melody Maker. My mum used to like it because it covered all kinds of music at that time. And she said, "Go for this, there's a phone number." And she said, "I'll ring up for you." So she rang up and this guy answered the phone, a guy called Rupert Clahar. And he said, "We're holding auditions on Sunday in Paddington." And I said to my mum, she said, "Dad will take you, don't worry about it." So on the Sunday, we get in the car, we go to Paddington, and it was this room, a bit Joe Meeky, above a shop. I don't know what the shop sold, and there were two other guitar players there and myself, and we all went in, and right at the very end of the day, two of them went and left me sitting there, and Rupert came out and said, "We'd like you to do the job, Ray." So that was how I got into Rupert and the Red Devils.
Right, and they're interesting, apart from anything else, because they're one of the first UK kind of ska blue beat bands.
They were. They'd come over from Jamaica and Trinidad, Nathaniel Fredericks and Rupert Clahar. And yeah, they were, and I was 15 going on 16 then, and we had to play nightclubs, and my dad was wonderful. We used to play the Roaring Twenties in Carnaby Street. And my dad used to drive me up there. We used to leave about 11 o'clock at night because we didn't have to start till 12 or something ridiculous like that. And he used to sit outside and wait for me. Those are the days you can park where you liked in London. And he was great. He sat there, he waited for me. He was really behind me. And we played a lot of American Air Force bases. We went to Germany. We had Mel Turner join the band for a while. He's kind of a bit of a cult soul singer, I believe now, vinyl that's around of him. And we went to Germany, and we stayed together, not a great deal of time, but out of that band evolved the XLs, which was the rhythm section from the band, and we went on to play together.
So did the XLs in due course evolve into the Syndicats, or was that
No, XLs became a band that we used to work for various agents, and when they brought American artists over, like Dee Dee Warwick, we became a backing band. We used to work with Keith Powell, Elkie Brooks, The Soul Show, The Marionettes, and we used to do these theatre tours. We played with Marty Wilde for a while, and it was really the rhythm section from Rupert's band became the XLs. We did a season at Butlins like everybody does.
Yeah. So that presumably then did run its course, and at some point you left the XLs and joined the Syndicats.
I did. What happened was I joined the Syndicats, but I didn't stay that long. The XLs got back together again, and we became that backing band again, doing various things. But the time I was in the Syndicats wasn't very long. It kind of folded very, very quickly. I'm not sure why, but it did.
And you replaced Steve Howe?
I replaced Steve Howe. Steve, and I became. Steve was great because I went to the audition after. So I went to the audition, and Steve was there. But he was a nice. He treated me fairly, and I think they had him there to say, does he get the gig? Which I did. And but then Steve took me back to his house, which was close by, in the Tottenham area, and he started to play me some things I'd never heard before. Jazz guitar players, and I thought, I really like this. Steve said, you should get this album, Grant Green or whatever. So I did. I started to. Kenny Burrell was another one that I really liked that Steve had, and so I became kind of friends with him, and he really turned me on to a lot of music perhaps that I wouldn't have known had I not met him on those days. So I think, and later on I played in his band.
Of course. So Syndicats most famous, I guess, for this B-side, Crawdaddy Simone, produced by the legendary Joe Meek.
That's right.
Maybe just tell us how that track came about.
Well, that track came about because we didn't have a B-side, because the A-side was On the Horizon, Benny King cover, that Steve played on. So we go in the studio, and it was really to write a song, but it was a bit of a disaster that day. Nothing happened, and the guy who ran the band, Kevin Driscoll, was a bit wild. He had a mother called Ellie Driscoll, who was the manager of the band, and everyone said the only reason that they got that is that she used to go down the Holloway Road and bang on Joe's door, say, I want my boys' band in here to record,
Brilliant.
And that's how that came about. So Joe said, look, you two, you're writing songs together. This was myself and the pianist, Jeff. He said, go home for the night, come up with something, we'll come back tomorrow. So we did, we went home, we came up with Crawdaddy Simone. Crawdaddy coming from some Elvis song from a movie, I think perhaps Loving You, or one of the King Creole it came from, that's where it came from. And Simone, Nina Simone, put the two names together. So we write this sort of fictional thing about a blues man called Crawdaddy Simone. And it was a kind of nice rock blues song. But then Joe wanted a solo in the middle that was wild, and I had this Diamond pedal, which was a volume tone which features on the Crying Game. It's that sound pre-wah-wahs. And he said, no, he said, I want it wild, Ray. He said, you can do a bit at the beginning where you're playing normally, which I did. And he came back with a beer bottle, and he said, I want you to run this up and down the strings, like, and I, okay, fine. I said, well, they usually cut the end off and put it on their finger, Joe. No, I don't want that. He said, I just want it like this. So I did that. We got to the section. He's standing there going, now. Okay. And that became the Freak Beat solo.
Brilliant. And a legend was born.
Was born.
So was your next band the T-Set then? Was that the next?
Yeah, the thing that the T-Set came about because when we were playing in Germany with Rupert, we met a guy called Jerry Romaine, who was a guitarist. He had a band called The Defenders. They were playing in another nightclub. And Jerry said, our contract's about to end. And we said, ours is too. So Jerry said, why don't we go to Germany to play? So I know this place in Cuxhaven, So we did. We piled all the gear on. He rang up this bloke in a club. You could just do these things in those days. And we piled all our gear onto a train, went to Cuxhaven, and played in this dreadful nightclub, rat infested. It was horrible. And the guy used to walk about with a gun, and we had to play 7 hours a night or day in the afternoon through to the evening and then through the night. And I said to Jerry one day, "We've got to get out of here, Jerry." But Jerry said, "He's got a gun." I said, "Well, we go in the middle of the night." So at 3 o'clock in the morning, we packed all the gear up, and we found a train that went at 6 in the morning, and we went to Delft, where Jerry lived. We played there for a little while. Cut a long story short, I go back home, and I get a call from Jerry, the guitarist, and he says, "Ray, I'm in a hit band called T-Set." And I said, "Oh yeah," and he said, "But I want to leave. I'm joining a band called The Motions, who are also very successful. Would you like to come to Holland to play?" And that's how I went to Holland, and I joined the T-Set, or T-Set. It's not the T-Set, it's T-Set, which means like golf, to tee off.
So how were T-Set different from maybe the Syndicats? Were they more of a...
T-Set were an out-and-out pop band.
Right.
But from the T-Set, there became another band called After Tea. Not very...
Yeah, I can see what they did there.
Yeah, what should we call ourselves? After Tea. Oh, okay. So we did, anyway. Not very original. But we were a psychedelic band. We were very, very different. I remember we got Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and we got it on a Thursday, and I said, "We're going to learn this. We're going to play it Saturday night." So we opened the show. You can imagine, can't you? Just suddenly, and of course that labelled us psychedelic. But it's quite a cult band now. After Tea, there's a lot of the tracks we played, and of course After Tea, which was one of our singles, became a single for Spencer Davis.
Which leads us seamlessly to the next instalment in your career, which is you're based in Holland,
Yes.
and then you get an opportunity to join this hit band, Spencer Davis Group. So
I do.
I was going to say, maybe just tell us how that happened, really.
Right. I used to lodge in a house in The Hague, where the daughter of the family, she used to work for Paul Arquette, who was the biggest agent in Holland. He used to bring bands over he was the biggest agent in Holland, and he used to bring bands over from the United Kingdom, Small Faces. He did Hendrix, and one of the bands he did was the Spencer Davis Group. And it was on a Friday night they were there, and she said, "Do you want to come and see them play?" And I said, "I can't. We're playing with After Tea that night," so I couldn't go. Anyway, next when she got back, I think it was the next morning that this happened. She said, "You're going to Rotterdam this morning." And I said, "Why?" She said, "You're going to meet Spencer Davis." I said, "Oh, very nice, but why?" She said, "He's looking for a good new guitarist. The guy he's got in the band at the moment, Phil Sawyer, which was from a band called Fleur de Lis when he joined the Spencer Davis Group, he doesn't want to go on the road. He's decided he wants a family life, so he's staying at home." So Spencer said, "I'm looking for a guitarist," and I said to Spencer, this was her, "We've got one of those living in our house." So she said, "You're coming." So we go down there, get in a car, and I've got a guitar with me, thinking, how the hell am I going to play it? So we go in there. The first person I see is Eddie Harding, the keyboard player. I just said, "Hello, Eddie." And he looked at me, "Who are you?" Anyway, Spencer said, "Come over here, sit on the couch." We sit on the couch in this lovely hotel in Rotterdam. And he said, "Play for me." So I said, "Well, it's electric guitar, Spencer." I said, "You've got one of those." And I got no amp. He said, "Don't worry." He said, "Just get the headstock, put it against my ear." He said, "I'll be able to tell whether you can play or not." So I put it against his ear, and I played a few jazz chords, which always impresses people. And then I played a bit of blues. And he said, "Yes, I like what you do, Ray." He said, "We're doing a new album at the moment with a new face on." And he said, "If you come back to England, you can audition for the band, and if you what we want, you get it." So I spoke to the guys in After Tea. They said, "Ray, you've got to do this." So I came back to England. I think it was December '67, I think, around that time. And they were in the studio. I went down there, and the first thing I did was have to play on Mr. Second Class. They'd taken Phil Sawyer's guitar off. He showed me what the chords were, and he said, "Go." And that was it. And I played that and stayed with him. Got the job.
Yeah, so that was a really interesting period because Spencer Davis Group had lost Stevie Winwood and they were reinventing themselves with Eddie Harding as their new singer.
That's right.
What are your fondest memories of your time? I know obviously you played off and on with Spencer Davis Group through to the mid-70s.
One of my nicest memories was meeting Mike Hurst, the producer, who was Cat Stevens' producer. He did Matthew and Son. He did I Love My Dog, Gonna Get Me a Gun. Just a very nice guy and a great producer. I became great friends with him and have worked with him ever since those days in 1968. But one of the things that I liked about it, or that I noticed, it was so structured. When we were in Holland, the producers that we had, like with After Tea, they were phonogram people. They were guys that did, schmaltz. They did terrible pop records, and they were everything but not wearing the white coat. Like a lot of those people, Abbey Road people, except they just wore a shirt. But they weren't rock and roll people. And when I started to work with Mike, I suddenly realised that this is a different way of making records, and that's
a better way. Hopefully.
A better way of making records.
Okay. So, I wanted to ask you about one particular episode in the story of Smith's which is this theme from Magpie.
Yeah.
Because that's become a bit of a cult favourite down the years.
It has.
It's the Murgatroyd Band.
Murgatroyd Band.
Maybe you could tell us how that all happened.
Sure. I believe it was either Spencer's or Pete York's friend who was on the production team of the show. And it was a new show, and they were looking for something to outdo Blue Peter, something anarchic, because Blue Peter was a hornpipe. They wanted a rock and roll song, like to say, wow, whatever it was, twice a week I think it was on. So again, we went away and we came up with that song, it was written by me, Spencer, and Eddie Hardin, and whoever wrote the nursery rhyme. But we had to, at the time it was just because the single didn't come out till later. We did a 30-second intro for the show, and of course the outro, and we went on the show twice and we played a full-length version of it, and people started to ask, can they buy this? But we went on there pretty blind, really, because they didn't really know we were the Murgatroyd Band. But of course, Spencer's had so many hit records that after people knew who he was. You could just see who he was, and it came out that it was the Spencer Davis Group, which perhaps made it even more interesting.
Yeah. So around that time, early 70s, 71, you finally kind of make a solo record.
Yeah.
Keep America Beautiful,
Get a Haircut.
How did that come about?
That came about touring America. It was during the President Johnson era, and his good wife, Lady Bird Johnson, took it upon herself to clean America up. And one of the things that she thought would clean America up would get everybody to get a haircut. And they made these posters, and it literally said that. Keep America Beautiful, get a haircut. And I thought, that's a good idea for an album there. I can compose a song that is called Keep America, Get Beautiful, Get a Haircut. But in the end, I just used it as the title. But I wrote this song called Stateside, which was about all the things I thought was wrong with America, including that sign saying Keep America Beautiful, Get a Haircut. It was a crazy thing to do. Can you imagine anyone doing that? I can't.
Maybe not now.
But that's how that album came about, and it's become quite a cult album. The cover was done with me on a hoarding, with long hair at that time, and hair, of course, at that time. And it was done by the drummer of the band, a guy called David Hines, who was a very good artist. He used to do amazing things. We used to stay in Holiday Inns all the time. And in the Holiday Inn, they always had this mural on the wall. It looked like it was penciled, and it was of a Greek scene where the ruins, Greek ruins, and it had pillars that had fallen over, various bits and pieces on the floor. Dave used to go in there, and he used to decorate the whole room with pencil. He'd draw ice cream vendors. He'd draw aeroplanes coming across, beautifully done. And you'd see like the maid coming in the next morning, looking at this going, there's something different on that wall, what is it? But Dave would spend hours just doing all. So I used him to do this, and some of those things that he used to do on the Holiday Inn walls are on that cover. Like there's an ice cream vendor. Right. That was one of his favourites. He used to have an ice cream vendor.
Oh, okay, excellent. So, okay, fast forward a few years, and you join what, in hindsight, feels like a bit of a supergroup, Fancy. But it started, I guess, by
Fancy was. I was a session player. I'd met Mo. I was a session player before Mo, really.
Yeah.
Mo's very first session, I was on it, and I always remember Mo laughs about it now. He turned up with a bag with sandwiches and a flask, and I said, well, we do go out at lunchtime to eat. That's we both laugh about that now. But that was really sort of Mo's baptism with fire with sessions, and we were doing a Barry Ryan record, which I can't remember what it was for a guy called Wayne Bickerton, and over the years, Mo and I did a lot of sessions. One of them, which was, Mike said, I'm doing this other version of Wild Thing, Chip Taylor song that the Trogs had done. And he said, I've got this idea to have a sexy voice over the top, kind of talking it. I want you guys to come in and do it. So we went in and did it. At the time, it was Henry Spinetti, I think, played on that, the drummer, played with Clapton and various people. And we went in and did this track, and it had this girl singing called, I can't even remember her name, Helen somebody or other, and she obviously wasn't a singer, but what she did on that record was right for the record. Anyway, we thought nothing more about it, and it became a big hit in America. And Mike rang up and said, we got a hit in the States. Do you want to go there? So Mo and I said, yeah, why not? So we'll give it a shot. But of course we didn't have a singer. So we had to find somebody, and we found Annie Kavanagh. She was in Jesus Christ Superstar, she'd been in Hair, a show singer, but great voice. And of course we had to do Wild Thing, but she sang it, and of course it was a bit more raucous than the original. But it's a shame that we didn't get the first hit with an actual pucker song, but it wasn't to be. But hey, if we hadn't have had that, we may never. But we had a second hit too, called Touch Me. They were both in the top 20, I think, in America.
So yes, I clearly fancy you carry on for a couple of years, release 2 albums. But what I was amazed by, looking at your CV from the 1970s, how many folks you played with, how many sessions and how many records you played on.
Yeah.
I wonder if there are any particular favourites other than ones we mentioned.
I mean, I used to. Martin Ford was my fixer. We used to have fixers who booked you on, and through Martin, I met Roger Glover, and I was on a call for some Ian Gillan Band, Ian Gillan tracks. He was doing some demos, I think for Sher Kazoo, or one of those early albums that he had out as a solo album. And that's how I got involved in. But in answer to your question, my fond memories, of course, Roger, wonderful songwriter, and the great song Love Is All, which was from the Butterfly Ball. That was one of the things I did that I was really proud of. A wonderful album, a wonderful live show at the Royal Albert Hall. I worked with David Coverdale in that era too, with there was an album called Wizards Convention that Eddie Harding put together, and we wrote a song in the studio called Money to Burn. Got in there at 10, 11 in the morning, said, okay, we're going to write this song. So David's there, me, Eddie Harding, and we sit around with a guitar, what do you think of this, Ed? Oh yeah, David, I've got a couple of lines there. But great song, really good song.
It's interesting because Eddie, the partnership you had with Eddie Harding, obviously you'd worked with him in Spencer Davis Group, but that continued for many, many years.
It did. We've written so many songs together and played on a lot of Eddie's projects. Wind in the Willows he did, of course, Love Is All. I mean, that was quite a lot of Eddie's partnership with Roger too. It was a duo really, that performance, I think. And the icing on the cake was Ronnie Dio, the singer. That man has got had the most wonderful voice. So one of the voices I've ever worked with. Him and Chris. I worked with Chris Farlow too, and those two guys, voices to die for. Yeah.
Going back to Eddie, you obviously struck up quite a special relationship with him.
I did.
Why did you?
It was a social relationship too. We used to go out quite a lot together.
Yeah.
Those, we were saying, the days you could park in Oxford Street. And we go out to various nightclubs, the Speakeasy and Scotch of St James, and we were just buddies. We were in the same group and everything. But we found that we could write things really well. And Eddie used to call me the bridge man, because he'd write these songs, and then he'd say, "Oh, I need a really nice bridge there, Ray. The middle eight, as it used to be called." And he said, "You got some nice chords and things." So I'd write like the bridges, and then we'd sit down and we'd write really catchy lyrics too. We were good at doing that. He had an American girlfriend, and she always used to say, "Catch you on a rebop," like when she was saying goodbye. A rebop, what's that? Catch you on a rebop. That's what it is. And when I said, that's a great title. So we did a Spencer Davis song called "Catch You on a Rebop," which is also a nice track.
Yeah, and I think a hit actually.
Yes, it was.
It was a hit single. So not too long after that, you also worked for a couple of years with the Ian Gillan Band.
I did. I worked the Ian Gillan Band came out of those early sessions with Roger. Ian was at a bit of a loss after Deep Purple as to what to do, and one of the people that was on that session, or some of those sessions I did there, was John Gustafsson from the Big Three. He only played with Roxy Music for a while. Wonderful bass player, wonderful singer, and Ian idolised John. He really, John's not with us anymore, bless him. But Ian always wanted to work with John. There was an opportunity, and Ian said, "I like the sound of this band." He said, "Why don't we do something?" It was me, Mark Nossif, the drummer from Elf, Johnny Gus, and Mike Moran, session keyboard player, and he said, "Let's make an album." So we did. We made the first Ian Gillan Band album, which was Child in Time. We got a record deal, and we took it from there. Really, we went to Japan, but it was very different to what Ian did with Deep Purple. It's getting the kind of recognition that it deserves now. I've noticed on YouTube there are so many hits now for the Ian Gillan Band, whereas before no one was that interested. But the audiences we played to loved us. You know, in Japan we went really well. And we did another album called Scarabaeus, and we did a couple of live albums too. But a good time. Yeah, that was the late 70s, I think. Yeah, 2-3 years.
So we mentioned Eddie Harding earlier, but another person you continued working with was Mike Hurst.
Yes.
Certainly after Spencer Davis Group and Fancy. And both sort of songwriting and production. Yeah. Again, you seem to have struck up a special relationship.
I did with Mike. We really became really good friends, and with my family and him, and his family. He was just and still is. I'm talking about. There's no past about Mike. He's still with us, thank God. But he was always a thorough producer. I always used to love Mike. He'd want the best. He wouldn't say, "Oh, that's all right." You know, he'd always want the best. And we worked well together. I worked on his 2 solo albums. I worked on his son had a single out. I worked on that.
Jonas.
Yeah. We've played live together. We played live together a lot. Mike had a summer school for budding rock musicians. I did that with him for 5 years. There's many things we've done, lots of things. He had a label called Lamborghini, and I produced 2 or 3 of the artists on there, one being Sam Fox. I did that. And various other artists, over the years that maybe nothing happened much with the records, but always great productions.
So again, fast forward to the mid to late 80s, and you joined another kind of supergroup, but this time a sort of more heavy rock band called Forcefield.
Forcefield,
So again, tell us.
Well,
tell us
that
the
came
background to
about. I used to work in a studio down the South Coast, and I used to use it, or I'd played in there with some people and various bits and pieces. And I said to the owner, "I'd like to do another version of Smoke on the Water." And that was the time when perhaps it wasn't, so stupid to try and do another version of Smoke on the Water. So I said, "I'll ring Cozy up. I know Cozy. See if he'll come down and play." And I spoke to him about it, and he said, "Yeah." He said, I'll come down." So Cozy came down. We found a local singer, a guy called Pete Prescott, great voice. And I'm not sure who played bass. Neil Murray did some of it, and I think that it was a local guy, Terry Pack, I think he was. And we did this, but we started to do it, and the guy who owned the studio was also a good producer, and he made the thing start to sound amazingly good. It was just very, very different to the original. Although the arrangement was the same, it was sounding very, very modern, the sound. Lots of new sounding, I think it was a brand new desk, and the whole thing just sounded $1 million, it had that sparkle on it. And we did it, and the first person I took it to was David Kasner. I knew David Kasner, from President, and David said, "I'll get you a deal in Japan on this." He did, and the Japanese record label really liked the idea of doing covers, so we did a whole album of rock covers: Kinks, Led Zeppelin, Cream. Again, something perhaps you wouldn't do now, but they were all with Cozy, and they were all very good versions. People didn't go, "Oh my God, why did you do that?" They liked it, and Smoke on the Water became quite successful over especially in Japan. Yeah. But we went on and we did 3 more albums. I always used guests. I had Jan Ackerman, I had Graham Bonnet singing, Tony Martin, singer from Black Sabbath, great voice. And we did 3 albums, and it was great fun. I went to Australia to record Graham Bonnet. Also did a solo album with Graham Bonnet as well. Another great singer.
Yeah. So, talking about artists you continue to work with, so another one would be Steve Howe.
Yep. And
obviously back in the early 60s, he's this obscure budding musician.
Yes.
By the time you reunite with him in his band in the...
He's prog god.
Well, he'd been in a prog group called Yes, who were quite popular.
Yeah.
So tell us how you reunited with Steve.
It came through RPM, Mark Stratford, bless him. He suggested that he'd been speaking to Steve, and he suggested that Steve and I write something together. Not really knowing what for, so I go down to Steve's place in Devon, and we came up with a track that we were going to call Syndicats, but we never did. It ended up as Slim Pickings in the end, and it took quite a few. Steve was off, but we finally finished it. It's on one of Steve's last albums. And in the studio, we used to do a lot of Steve's like Chet Atkins too, and we both can play that country style guitar. And we used to sit around playing it, And Steve, he'd say, "Oh, what's that one, Ray?" And I go, "Yeah, show me that one." And it was just a bit of fun. But it's an important bit of fun because when Steve was going to put a band together, I think it was 2004, called Remedy, there were a couple of tunes that required that style, and Steve remembered me that I could do it. So he rang me and he said, "Look, would you like to do this tour?" So I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." So we did, and there was the couple of country songs that are in there were great, and there's a video came out, and but I think we did about maybe 15 shows around Europe, and but it was a good band. And then Steve went off back to Yes, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So all of this is prompted, of course, by the fact that you have a new anthology out.
Yes.
3 CD, Playing Through the Changes. And I wondered how you, reflecting on all the choices of the tracks you made for it, how do you feel you've changed as a musician, and how has popular music changed, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I've got the album here. If I look at it, if I go back to my first recording, which was with Rupert and the Red Devils, it was a ska track, but it was something that I wasn't obviously brought up with, but I knew instinctively how to play it. I had one of the first guitar teacher I had wasn't that great, but I had a wonderful second guitar teacher. He was the guitarist in the Edmondo Ross Orchestra, and he was a lovely man. He was a wonderful jazz guitar player, and he used to sit. He always, on Friday nights, I always used to go Friday nights. He used to sit there, and he'd play these wonderful chord changes, warming up for his gig in the evening. And I used to say, "Can I do some of that?" He said, "Not yet, Ray, not yet," but he said, "You will do." Anyway, cut a long story short, his name was Len. I think it was Len Smith. He followed my career all the way, and many years later, he knew somebody at Phonogram, and there was a message for me one day from him, and it said, "Great to see it worked out for you, Ray."
Excellent.
It was lovely, and that was years later.
Yeah.
And it was really, really nice. But in answer to just ask me the second part of that question again.
Yeah, so just really thinking about how you feel you've changed as a musician with the title Playing Through the Changes. For you as a person and as a musician, how do you feel you've evolved down the years?
I mean, I'm always interested in all styles of playing, so I've always been have guitar will travel. My very first recording was a blue beat stroke ska recording with Rupert and the Red Devils. I had no experience of that, but I just kind of knew how to play it because I was a learning guitar player. It was one of those things that you pick up. We had a lot of records lying around the house. I'm sure there was something with a backbeat like that I picked up and knew how to play. And then, of course, I've gone on to play pop music in Holland and R&B at quite a young age with the Spencer Davis Group. And then I started to get interested in a lot of things that were very musical, chord-wise. I was always into my songwriting with Eddie Hardin, much more sophisticated changes, title. So I've evolved. I've always, one of those things that you have to, as a session guitar player, I was always told that, remember Ray, you might have to turn up at 10 o'clock in the morning on one session, not knowing what the hell you're going to be playing. And somebody says to you, can you play like Hank Marvin? And if you can't do that, you are stuffed. You ain't going to get booked again. So you've got to make sure that you turn up with the Strat, with the tremolo arm, and you turn up with a Les Paul so you can play something, a heavier rock tune. And that always stuck with me. So I've always developed all the way through, sometimes through the learning process through the various sessions that I did, always adding to my repertoire, my styles, which you can hear on this album.
Absolutely, playing through the changes. Ray, thank you very much for coming in. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
My name's John Reed. This is Ray Fenwick.
I'm Ray
Thank you
Fenwick.
for
Thank you
watching.
very much.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you.